one of the big things that I always want to know when I start working with someone, regardless now of what they come in for, is what big events have happened in your life. Because and sometimes people, what's that got to do with anything? Why are you asking me that? And it doesn't have to be childhood. It doesn't have to be sort of like, I had bad parents or whatever. It might be like, a situation that happened with friends or at school. It could be something that happens in adulthood, but I'm just kind of going, what are some of the really big events that have happened throughout your life? Because I'm wanting to know, what did we decide that meant? So whenever something big happens, we make a decision on what does this mean and how do I want to store that for guiding me and moving me forward. So your limbic brain is going, how do I use that information to keep me safe? And the reality is if it's quite a big event, for a lot of us, we won't always store that in the most useful of ways. If I burn myself on a cooker, I don't want to say, oh my God, that's dangerous, I never want to use a cooker again. That wouldn't be helpful for me. And while that seems like a silly way of describing it, but there are lots of things that will happen in our life that we do that then we kind of go, right, how do I avoid ever going and putting myself in that situation? Like if I have a really bad relationship, how do I avoid myself getting that hurt again? So, there's things that we do, the patterns that we create in our life that can be based on a decision or a belief that we made about something years and years ago.
Have you, for yourself, because right now you're pretty much manageable. You don't have for the digestive issue. Yeah. So have you noticed your own patterns? What things, or your personality or things?
I tend to be somebody that I would fester on things. So when something happens, kind of, like I said, I went for a kinesiology session. I was like, okay, I need to know more about that. What was that? Like, help me explain it and help me understand it. So I guess for me, if it is bothering me, it's kind of going, okay, what's going on that I'm struggling to let go of? What's going on for me so it's, then sort of looking at those things and going, what have I not given myself time to be able to process and to be able to work through?
Okay. So what do you do if anything comes up for yourself? What do you do to help yourself?
Tapping is a big one that I like to do for myself. So I find that really helpful. If there's something going on that I'm kind of really stuck on, I will often try and find, so a thing I'll try and ask myself is, okay, I'll give myself permission to go into that worst space. So what's the worst thing that could happen? And I give my brain that permission to have that thought, right? Okay, this is your little moment. This is your 5 minutes of fame. What's the worst thing that we possibly think can happen here? And I give it that time and that space, because by ignoring it, sometimes, it's going to keep talking to me. So I'm giving it its moment to explain to me what it's so worried about. But then with that, I'm also like, right, okay, well, with this situation, what's the best thing that can happen? So I kind of allow myself to go to the worst, and then I force myself to go, right, well, what's the best thing that can happen? And then I kind of come to normally the middle. What's the most likely? So it's to try and just give my brain the opportunity to open up, because we often, when we're sort of worried about something, when we get stuck in something, we're very one-dimensional, aren't we? We're like, this is what's going to happen, and we get stuck on that. So it's trying to open up the possibilities, because when we open up the possibilities, the brain does start to react differently. Physically, I like to run. So when I'm got stuff going on, I'll try and take myself for a run, try and do that outdoor, like, sort of in nature. So try and be either the beach or trail running or something like that. So I find that useful. Make sure I'm meditating more than normally. I'll notice the less I meditate, the more often these things will happen. There's sort of some of the big things that I'll do when I notice those coming up.
Beautiful.
I think the thing is, as a human, we are definitely more reactive than proactive, aren't we? Humans tend to be when something goes wrong. And so that's normally what it is normally I've got a bit complacent, and these habits have fallen out, and something happens to remind me, you need to bring them back in.
Yeah, I guess, that's, again, it's part of the journey. If we I actually had one period of time I was so consistent. I was so good with meditation, prayer, and exercise. And then again, it's life. When we get caught in the life, and then we feel, oh, life is all good. And that's sometimes, and I actually feel really grateful for whatever things happens, because that's just a reminder. So I know I don't wait for the big, or some people beat my truck. And so I just say, are you telling me something? So I go work on it. And it's good for people to have that awareness, knowing that's, if you have any kind of symptoms, and that's just the universe, God, and telling you to slow down or pay attention and do something, and be careful and be kind to yourself.
Exactly. And I think we're giving ourselves that like grace of, yes, I am human. I might not remember to do this every day. There are days that I'll forget, and it's okay. I can just start again.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. That's the beauty of life. It's really, and then it's never too late. Even like old people. There's one little thing that I find it so interesting though. I'm fascinated by, so my dad, he's very old and he's heavy smoker, heavy drinker. I don't know, he's probably doesn't do as much, but for a long time, for many, many years, he's been doing that. And then somehow he's healthy as. That's something you just like, you couldn't understand. I can't understand. He rarely gets even a cold, and he doesn't even exercise much either. He sits there and playing with all the old people, sit on the table. I guess sometimes everyone's just different, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think sometimes that can be the thing that a lot of, like, if we have got something that's wrong with us, people can sometimes struggle with that. Like, this is unfair, or like, how we don't get to really decide what life is going to throw at us. What I say to people, I'm like, you have a choice of, do you want to stack the odds in your favor and do what you can to support yourself through that? Or do you just want to kind of like, go along for the ride and whatever happens, happens? And we have some people in life. I think one of the oldest women that ever lived was a French woman who the only reason that she stopped smoking was because she couldn't see to light her cigarette anymore. But is it because the attitude and the way that they deal with life is so different? Do the way that they perceive a cigarette, is it different to somebody else? Because, there's a big thing about how we perceive it in the first place. So when it comes to stress, if we perceive it to be dangerous and bad, and I guess that's one of the big things, because everyone's like, you need to avoid stress. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I do that? Whereas I'm like, no, we don't need to avoid stress. We need to manage stress. We need to have tools to help us deal with stress. So the way that we view things, the way that we manage things really changes stuff. There was a thing that was done in America where they got these people who were cleaners, and they told half of them, we want you to think about when you're cleaning that you're having a free workout. So you're being paid to go to the gym. And they didn't say anything to the other half of cleaners. So they would both groups were doing the same physical exercise, but they told the first group to consciously think about the fact that you're moving your body and exerting energy. The half that they gave that information to started to lose weight.
Let your light shine. Help others find their way out of the darkness. Extraordinarily inspiring stories from ordinary people like you and I. I believe we are all extraordinary, yet we're all ordinary. Let your light shine.